Apparently, the internet went out 2 days ago. Theo from T3GG made a video about it. I'd love to watch it with you. Got my coffee. Let's jump into it.
Discord, Google Cloud, Spotify, Google, Twitch, Character AI, Google Meet, Rocket League.
I use like Discord, obviously Google, Twitch, and so on. I haven't noticed thing personally.
Nest, Cloudflare, AWS, High Level, even T3 Chat. It kind of feels like the whole internet went down today. And I don't know about you guys, but that gets me really scared. Even though the internet's this big open place, it feels more and more like we're relying on the same set of providers, and that terrifies me. Feels like one of my favorite XKCD comics coming to life. You know, the classic project maintained by some random person in Nebraska powering the whole world. It's like that, but big companies, which in some ways is better, in others.
So this to me, it's when I use a service, it's like usually polished and feels well, or from the user standpoint, right? Smooth, so on. And when you work for those companies that create very big, like worldwide products, you see all the you see this basically. It's so funny to me.
This is worse. And this one was particularly scary. That said, of all the companies listed, other than T3 Chat, none of these are paying me. So I have to make a quick buck before we break down this outage. We lost a lot of money today, so I'm sure lots of others did. So quick word from today's sponsor, and then we'll dive into why half the internet was down. Today's sponsor is a company that I am super hyped to call a sponsor because they were a product I used for years before I even had the balls to reach out and ask. The company is PostHog, and I am so happy I started using them as an all-in-one suite for the product tools that we need. It has been a lifesaver for us for T3 Chat. They have everything from analytics to feature flags to surveys and so much more. I only was using the analytics for a while, but recently we started using other things like the feature flags because, you know, we added the beta to T3 Chat, which I put under a feature flag. You might be thinking, wait, there's a setting that I can click to turn on the beta though. How'd you do that? Let's look at the code. Here is the actual source code for the beta toggle for T3 Chat. Const posthog is use posthog. I have a use effect to store the current value. I learned afterwards that they actually have a hook to get you the value, but I had already written this code. It is what it is. Handle toggle, you just...
That's another thing. He already wrote that code. There is nothing more permanent than a temporary solution. It's...
Call posthog.update early access feature enrollment with the key for the thing you want to update and the is enabled flag. That's it. That's all the code I had to write in order to enable the feature flag for people to opt into the beta. And I can still roll it out myself and allow users to opt in or out. Since they're an analytics platform, I can hop in the dashboard and see the analytics for how often the beta is being called and used and how many people have opted in. And we can see clearly 10,000 people have opted into the beta. Super cool to see. I was always skeptical of tying my feature flag so closely to my analytics tool, but I found that it's really useful for keeping track of who's in what state when you're doing your analytics, and it's actually really, really nice to have them so tightly tied. PostHog has continued to impress me, and the fact that it's open source just makes it even better. I have a feeling you'll dig them a ton if you give them a shot, and there's a good chance it'll be free if you do. Over 90% of the companies using PostHog aren't using it enough to pay any money at all. So give it a shot if you haven't. Check them out today at soydev.link/posthog. So before we can go too deep on why the internet was down, we need to talk about what powers all of the internet that makes these things happen. The internet can go down because your ISP is having issues, your DNS is having issues, all these other things. But I want to focus on the services themselves, not like your ability to go on the web and get to a given web page, but for the web page to process your request and send you a response. That's the thing we're talking about today, and these are the world's 4 biggest providers for that.
This is actually interesting. I was thinking there should be Akamai here. I wonder what they are using. Well, I guess not this data center. Okay. Well, I guess they have Linode now. Interesting, because Akamai advertises as, let's say, managing like 20% the whole internet traffic daily, and it's quite a lot. So I wonder why it's missing. Oh, I guess like AWS, GCP, Azure makes sense to me. Cloudflare is, if Cloudflare is here, then I think like Akamai, a couple of others should be here. But okay.
Obviously, there are still people who run their own VPSs on their own like servers or rent provisioning from services like Hetzner, but those are not in the top revenue charts at all. These are the companies that make most of the money on web.
Okay, maybe that's why.
Hosting in the vast majority.
Let's see. Oh, let's do it. Once, okay. Okay. It's like triple almost. Interesting.
Majority of web service providers are using AWS, Google Cloud, Azure by Microsoft, or Cloudflare for some or all of their hosting, and many.
And to be honest, I didn't know like Cloudflare is standalone, unless. Let's see. So it's probably also it's probably doing everything, right? Self-hosting and using everything.
People go across these different providers in a multi-cloud setup.
But yeah, it's weird to me that Akamai is here, isn't here if Cloudflare is, because I think like Akamai, as far as I know, has like hundreds of thousands servers worldwide. So it's weird that Cloudflare is here and Akamai, which is like 2.5 its revenue, is not.
So what happened today? Well, first off, I want to acknowledge that Azure was not affected. Believe it or not, they are the second highest grossing cloud platform. They make almost as much money as AWS, sometimes even more, because they have crazy licensing, even though I'm positive a very small number of you guys are on Azure. Just knowing the number of developers deploying on Azure versus their revenue, it's kind of a crazy ratio, but Microsoft's making their money on Azure. Today, it seemed almost entirely unaffected, so not necessarily going to be much a part of this conversation.
For the purpose of like enterprise, I don't know the pricing, but for the purpose of like free user, I believe AWS, or at least I heard best things about AWS, like free tiers that you can just use it for free if it's like a personal website and so on. If you scale, obviously the costs go up, but yeah. I use DigitalOcean for hosting my website, and it's like $2 a month, but I don't really have a lot of traffic there.
AWS, however, did seem to have some issues reported, but I don't really know what those were. I can't find any definitive reports anywhere else about it, so we need to rule these two out for the time being. Even Twitch, which is built on top of AWS, you'd think if Twitch went down, it's obviously not using Google or Cloudflare or anything else. I have it on good words from some friends at Twitch that they caused their own outage separately from everything else we're talking about. So the Twitch one was caused by them. The AWS one, I have no real confirmation of. I think it might have been a red herring, but I haven't heard any reports whatsoever about an actual AWS outage.
By the way, this picture is from Down Detector. So if your service is not working, you can always go to Down Detector and see if people are reporting a specific service not working. You will see those graphs.
Today, and I've done my best to talk to everyone else I could to figure out why their things were down. And I have it on good record from both Google and Cloudflare what some of those reasons were. I also know why Heroku was down yesterday, but that's not even worth the conversation just yet. So let's dive in to why Google and Cloudflare both had an outage today, because that's scary. As we all know, both Google and Cloudflare are building their own provisioned infrastructure, their own servers, their own everything, so that you and I can deploy things at whatever scale we need to on the web.
he's correct, right? But the quick Google showed that, well, it would be kind of smart, right, to diversify, to not have rely on one infrastructure. Although they are building it, they also rely on GCP, like many other CDNs, right?
So why did both go down?
So my guess is, I have not watched this video, but my guess would be that part of Cloudflare's infrastructure, which relies on the GCP, was the problem. But this is my guess. The other thing could be that they had some, like Cloudflare have some DNS.
Well, believe it or not, and this is a thing almost nobody knew, myself included, Cloudflare does actually have some dependencies.
Yep. Let's see.
Cloudflare, in a very specific scenario, does build on Google Cloud.
Yep. So that's what I would imagine. That the part on GCP just fell through. And I'm not sure about initially, but my guess would be that they only started their infrastructure, like major overhaul or improvements fairly recently. I would imagine they started partially on GCP.
We'll get to what that scenario is in
We'll see. I guess he will explain
a minute. Because first we need to understand Cloudflare's set of options and things that they offer.
That's why Cloudflare was here, right? Well, it didn't really make any sense in this. Well, it did make sense, but compared to Azure, AWS, and GCP, like, it was weird.
I've had 3 eras of Cloudflare described to me internally, like how they think of it. Era 1 is the DDoS protection, which is the classic thing we've all seen Cloudflare do, is you use them as your DNS, and now they will deal with a giant DDoS when it happens for you.
Yeah, that's why I was mentioning Akamai, because they kind of work the same. They are a CDN, like Cloudflare is. So they speed up the content delivery for you. So let's say I have a website somewhere in the US, and someone from, say, I don't know, France or whatever, wants to access it, right? CDN makes it faster, kind of, right? Or kind of. They do a bunch of neat tricks like caching and like close proximity of peers and so on. It's like the edge of the network chooses the closest peer and it delivers the content. Something is pre-cached, there is prefetching, there's all sorts of stuff. And kind of smart, because you start with a CDN and then you offer a bunch of solutions on top of that, which is one of which is the DDoS protection. Because you can hide your server behind Cloudflare or Cloudflare's or Akamai's infrastructure, and then they handle the DDoS.
Really cool service. The reason so many people put their stuff behind it. That was the first.
By the way, my server is behind Cloudflare as well. It's on DigitalOcean, with DNS provider being Cloudflare, and that's why I have some protection from Cloudflare.
First era of Cloudflare. And to this day, if you go to the Cloudflare site, the big button in the corner, wait, did they change it? Did they actually change it now? Oh no, there it is. If you click the little menu there, under attack is the first option under login. They know that's one of the things that they are good for, so they make it really easy to onboard and protect your stuff if you're in the middle of getting DDoS.
Also, maybe Cloudflare did it the opposite. So they went with a DNS setup first, and then they pivoted to DDoS. While Akamai, I believe, started as a CDN, and then because, let's say your origin is behind Akamai, then Akamai can handle the security for you as well, at least on a broader scale.
That's the first era of Cloudflare. Next, they started investing in the developer platform. Obviously, that's what we're going to be focusing on most of today. Things like Workers, KV, R2, Turnstile, all the things that we use and like to develop on top of with Cloudflare. Era 3 is Zero Trust, which is their core.
Not sure if Akamai has that platform, same as Cloudflare, not sure.
Corporate internal platform for making it easier for businesses to manage everything safely, assuming that no device or individual can be trusted. So making everything provisioned access. It's a really cool platform. I know a lot of businesses love building on top of it. But obviously, the thing we're talking about.
Where's that Akamai? I think Akamai, for the last few years, focused on security instead. And now they are putting into, I think it's like data centers and compute. I know they bought recently some API endpoint protector company. I wonder what they are up to now.
For all of this is the middle end here, the developer platform. The reason I even bother bringing this up is it's all building on top of each other at any given point, and most of the parts come from the developer platform. I already mentioned Worker KV. Worker KV is one of the first things that they had built, similar to how AWS started with S3. Worker KV is the key value store on Cloudflare that lets you just store random data really, really trivially. We use it for a ton of stuff, including our auth layer for T3 chat, which is why T3 chat was down. Even though most of it is hosted on AWS, since our auth was managed through Cloudflare, through OpenAuth, the Cloudflare outage caused the auth layer to fail, so signed in users had a very broken experience. That sucks.
Oh, so okay. There's a couple of ways, let's say, that internet can go down, right? One of which is like CDNs or CDN data centers can fail, CDNs can fail, and so on, right? One of which is the DNS can fail. And I guess this is like a 1.B or 1.A, which is like a thing on a part of a CDN failed.
I'm unhappy about that. That said, the auth solutions that we would consider other than OpenAuth, almost all are building on top of Cloudflare as well, so they also suffered from the same outage. The Worker KV is their key value store. Then there's the actual Worker compute platform. Just going to call it Workers. That is their JS runtime that works on the edge that lets you deploy real server-side software in JavaScript and WASM applications around the world. And it's a really cool, powerful platform. The actual compute that runs on the Workers is not as strong as what you'd get in a Lambda, but as a result, the bills are hilariously cheaper. This is a big part of why everybody thinks Cloudflare is so cheap. They then have their CDN, which is their distribution for content, for static files, assets, and whatnot. They have R2, which I mentioned before, is their general blob store S3 alternative. They have D1, which is their database product. They have Turnstile, which is their CAPTCHA that in make sure user interacts mode is solid, but when you use it in invisible, it's super unreliable still.
Oh yeah, the CAPTCHA. In my work, we have to bypass it a lot, or bypass it. It doesn't really do much except slow us down, I guess.
This is some of the large number of developer tools that
slow us down, but by not much. It doesn't detect the bots like at all.
They have. And these vary in how useful they are and what...
It's still useful though, right? If you have a DDoS attack, you can just throw a bunch of turnstiles, so Cloudflare handles the DDoS or the DDoS. Higher rate of traffic instead of you, so your server is fine, and then at least it is not DDoS, right? It probably won't stop a lot of bots, but it will slow them down.
What different types of different things you would use them for, and also how stable and reliable they are. Like D1 is not something I would recommend almost anyone use. It's far too limited. R2 has gotten pretty far. It's a solid platform overall, but it's got weird edges that make it not quite as reliable as something as tried and true as S3. Turnstile I'd put closer to D1. CDN is very, very tried and true. Workers, close. I would say the Workers and the CDN are some of the most. But the KV, it's rock solid. It's like one of the things the industry has relied on for a long time. It's one of the best standard KVs you can use, and it's become like not the same level of standard as something like S3 or even Redis, but it's surprising how many things have a Worker KV ready package built for them, including OpenAuth. So what went wrong? Since Worker KV came first, it was one of the first things they made, and it's one of the most useful things ever, is just having a general KV store. You can solve most problems that are data related in the shape of a KV if you try hard enough. Believe me, I've tried far too hard. KV is the core for a ton of other things, and a lot of the services on Cloudflare rely on Worker KV. So when worker KV goes down, it tends to cascade the vast majority of Cloudflare. Worker KV is kind of the glue holding a lot of other parts together. It's the general storage that they use. Imagine how many of your computers would be running correctly if you rip their RAM out. It's honestly kind of similar how they use it, which makes sense. It's a really powerful, simple, essential platform. And since they're all running their own stuff, it should be really reliable. What I didn't know until today, and I am far from the only one who didn't know this, many others said this too, it was our understanding that the infrastructure between Google Cloud and Cloudflare is fully independent. We were wrong. I'm surprised this isn't information that was known before.
It's weird to me that it wasn't like known before. It could make sense, right? I believe that when Cloudflare started, I mean that they must have started somewhere, right? And like it would make sense to be one of the big infrastructure providers. So,
but worker KV,
it's not like I'm like judging for not knowing or something. That would be my guess. That yeah, because I believe that they started improving their infra much later in the game.
Does have some dependency on Google Cloud. I don't know the details of that dependency beyond it is a like cold storage, long-term storage solution. The cache layer and the write layer and a lot of other parts are still fully owned by Cloudflare, but there are some key pieces that Google Cloud is the source of truth for. It's honestly amazing that worker KV is as stable as it is because Google Cloud is not, and I am blown away that this has not been a detail that's ever really mattered until today. That all said, the level of ownership I've seen on the Cloudflare side here is unbelievable. It's incredibly rare for any company, much less one as big as Cloudflare, to do what they've done in terms of like owning this outage. I want to make sure we do justice to that. I just want to make sure that I'm not like on their behalf blaming Google when it is Cloudflare's thing to own, because they have fully owned this. This is from Dane, who is the CTO of Cloudflare. We let down our customers at Cloudflare today. Our workers KV service failed, and the downstream products that rely on that service had outages of their own. We will publish a full postmortem soon. I know that these kind of incidents have real and serious impact for teams around the world as they do their work and serve their own customers. Beyond the specifics of this incident, the postmortem will go into detail about how we're removing the failure case. We'll do everything we can to make this right going forward, and I apologize for the problems caused today. Everyone's been really supportive of them.
I actually fully agree with Theo in the sense that yeah, owning that mistake is huge. They could have been, well, Google failed, so something, right? But yeah, it's totally on Cloudflare. They should have some fail-safe or failover rather.
And with this, as they should be, it is incredibly rare to see this level of ownership at that level of company. And Dane's also a bro. He's been awesome in every interaction I've had with him. So let's go through this outage report. On June 12th, 2025, Cloudflare suffered a significant service outage that affected a large set of our critical services, including Worker KV, Warp, Access, Gateway, Images, Stream, Workers AI, Turnstile, and Challenges, AutoRag, Zaraz, and just a lot of things, including the Cloudflare dashboard itself. The outage lasted 2 hours and 28 minutes and globally impacted all Cloudflare customers using the affected services. That is a massive outage, especially at like 100% of users being affected. That's a lot. Especially considering how prominent Cloudflare is across the internet. Terrifying that one domino falling can do that, especially when that domino wasn't theirs. The cause of the outage.
Agreed. The fact that they had like a single dependency on Google is kind of crazy. While this service apparently impacts all, like most others.
Outage was due to a failure in the underlying storage infra used by our workers KV service, which is a critical dependency for many Cloudflare products and relied upon for configuration, authentication, and asset delivery across the affected services. It's crazy how heavily they use worker KV, but as I said, most data problems could be done in the shape of a KV. Imagine that you need to spin up a compiled JS file on a given runtime somewhere else in the world. How do you get the right JS to the right place at the right time? Well, if it's all indicated in a KV that is globally distributed, it becomes very easy to just rip the value out of that KV store and run it in an eval in JS. And as silly as that way of doing it might sound, I am positive that that's similar to how workers actually works, because having a solid KV like that makes building those types of things way easier. So yes, as crazy as it sounds, KV is probably hosting a lot of the code that we are deploying on Cloudflare. We're deeply sorry for this outage. This was a failure on our part, and while the proximate cause or trigger for the outage was a third-party vendor failure, we are ultimately responsible for our chosen dependencies and how we choose to architect around them. This was not the result of an attack or other security event. No data was lost as a result of this incident. Cloudflare Magic Transit and Magic WAN, DNS, Cache Proxy, WAF, and related services were not directly impacted by this incident. The one thing I will say is that no data lost isn't as clean cut as one might think. If I was trying to log some analytics on Cloudflare while this outage occurred, I very likely lost that data during that time. That is data that existed in the moment that I expected to have persist in that moment that failed to persist. That does mean I lost the data, not them, but data was lost there, and it is to an extent the fault of whatever caused the outage. So I don't love that phrasing, but like, they got this blog post out so fast, I can't really fault them on the details like this. Speaking of blaming Theo, I did mention that T3 chat was down too. It no longer is, but since I'm the one who makes these decisions and I'm the one you should blame, use code BLAMETHEO in order to get your first month for just $1 if you're not yet a sub. It's only $8 a month and you get access to every AI model. It's the best AI chat I've ever used, and it probably will be for you too. And if it's not, tell me why on Twitter and we'll make sure it is. Anyways, what was impacted? As a rule, Cloudflare designs and builds our services on our own platform building blocks. And as such, many of Cloudflare's products are built to rely on the worker KV service. Very understandable. We're even doing this on T3 chat. Upload thing uses a bunch of the packages and cool things that we have built both independently and as part of the company. And obviously T3 chat uses upload thing for managing its files. This is all of the services that were impacted. There's a lot going on here. 90% plus of worker KV requests were failing. Anything that wasn't cached and required a retrieval from the origin storage would fail. Access, which is their identity-based system for making sure people should or shouldn't have access to a given thing, both internally and externally, was entirely down because it would pull these configs from the cold storage, and it couldn't. Certain gateway queries were affected. Warp was affected because of access and worker KV. Dashboard, which uses all of these things, was having a ton of issues for people. Standard login didn't work due to turnstile. Login with Google OIDC failed due to KV. SSO logins failed due to access. But the V4 API was fine. I do appreciate when this happens, especially on our side with T3 chat. It's always funny when like the Claude website goes down because they screwed up their auth, but T3 chat is still up and Claude on T3 chat is still up because we're not depending on anything other than their API. And honestly, we'll be moving off of Anthropic's API in favor of OpenRouter soon, at which point we're not even reliant on their APIs for being up, which will be cool. As has been touched on a couple of times now, challenges and turnstile were down, which is the things they use to replace CAPTCHAs. The one nice thing here is that turnstile would still fail bots, but it would also probably fail a human too. So it's not like bots were able to get into your service because turnstile was down. It's
because nobody was able to access the service.
It's that real users couldn't get into your service. Gateway initiated isolation.
So there is this saying that we had when I was working at I was working at Akamai before as a stock engineer, I guess. And when customers were under attack, and some team was trying to handle the attack, and deployed some wrong configuration that blocked, let's say, all the traffic. It really happened. It didn't happen that often, but let's say they overblocked, not all the traffic, but overblocked. So we had this saying, no traffic, no problem. And I guess with the turnstile, it's the same.
Sessions failed due to gateway dependency, so browser isolation was hit as well. Image uploads, 100% failure rate at the peak, terrifying. Delivery, thankfully, for actually loading the images wasn't hit quite as badly though. Stream was entirely down effectively. Real time was struggling, but it was not fully down. Workers AI was entirely down. Pages and workers assets was largely down. Yeah, pages peaked at 100%. You can see more and more how bad things were.
Wait, CDN. Okay. Because of some of failures, probably did a lot of retries, so increase in requests, imposed additional load in several Cloudflare locations. Yay.
The CDN was mostly up. I had a bunch of random issues, especially with zero trust clients. Workers was largely down, especially for uploading updates and making changes to workers. Error rate peaked pretty high at around 10% there. And the builder for building new JS for workers was entirely down too. Kind of crazy, just the number of services they have and how many were affected, but that's what I was doing, build on top of your stuff. But they want to fix that. As they say, Worker KV is built as what we call a coreless service, which means there should be no single point of failure as the service runs independently in each of our locations worldwide. This is a bold goal. There's a lot of different levels of distributed compute. You have the obvious option, which is one server in one place. You have the more convenient distributed option, which is one server for writes and reads are distributed across the world to however many other nodes. This is pretty common across different services. It's something that we love about Upstash, for example, where we have Redis distributed, where I write to the one region. The write happening slightly slower is fine, as long as reads anywhere in the world are fast. Really convenient. You then have replicated read-write across the world where everything has to distribute its knowledge and try to get it to the right source of truth that will then distribute it across other nodes. But then you have what they want to do here, which is full independence worldwide. I'm sure they will still do eventual consistency where a worker KV instance in one place will make sure a different one in a different place still shares the same data. But the idea that they won't fall over if a single source is down is really hard to get right, but really cool if you do. And I'm surprised KV didn't already work that way. As I say here, Workers KV today relies on a central data store to provide a source of truth for data. Single source of truth makes orchestration significantly easier, but it does hurt reliability in times like this. I understand why they're going to move off it now. The failure of that store caused a complete outage for cold reads and writes to the KV namespaces used by services across Cloudflare.
I'm not a software engineer. I don't really design systems like this, but it's like interesting to me that even if you have like a central data store, a failure of the data store caused complete outage for cold read writes, right? So wouldn't it make sense that even if you have a central data store, that you have a, let's say, close failover in case that store is, well, close, independent failover that holds the same data on a, let's say, on a different infrastructure, different whatever, right? Especially because as they said, like KV is like the backbone of their services, so it's fairly weird. Unless kind of it was built, it worked amazingly. Nobody even thought to reconsider how it was implemented, as is probably the case, I would imagine.
Including users that are using Worker KV on top of it as well. Worker KV is in the process of being transitioned to significantly more resilient infra for its central store. Regrettably, we had a gap in coverage, which was
Worker KV in the process of being transitioned.
Exposed during this incident. So right now, they are just trying to move to a more reliable central store. From what I understand, and they say here, their goal is to move that standard cold storage layer to R2, which is their S3 alternative, which means right now it is probably on Google's S3 alternative. And that is, again, just for the cold store.
I like how he's like saying S3 alternative, because everybody's like using Amazon enterprise-wide.
But the nature of KV is that things are cold stored for a long ass time, forever even, and then when they're hit, they're put in cache, and until they're hit again, they will sit for a bit or go back to be cold store if they're not hit soon enough. So most things will eventually need to be pulled from storage. That said, it was my understanding that R2 was built on top of KV, so the interdependency there is a little scary. I'm sure they have plans on how to fix that, but I thought R2 was built on KV, so we will see how they solve that problem. Apparently, Worker KV had removed a storage provider as they were working to re-architect KV's backend, including migrating it to R2, to prevent data consistency issues caused by the original data syncing architecture. Wow, syncing data across many places is hard. It's not a thing I've ever had to talk about or fight immensely, even in videos on this channel. That's a whole new problem to me. Also, data residency makes this significantly harder. When different countries have different rules about what data can be in the country, what data can be stored at all, what data is allowed to leave the country, syncing is not a simple problem. One of our principles is to build Cloudflare services on our own platform as much as possible, and Workers KV is no exception. This is particularly funny because like I saw a tweet, I couldn't find it to cite, but someone said like, despite GCP being down, google.com is still up. And that sounds good, but it's actually really bad. And it is. The fact that Google doesn't dog food their stuff at all is genuinely terrifying. And it's a big part of why GCP is as unstable as it is. Spanner is their database that they use for everything internally.
Wait, like whole GCP? I wouldn't imagine that whole GCP was down, right? Is Google not using GCP for? Is Google on GCP? Wait, what? Oh, Discovery Services. Oh, okay. They have like a separate infrastructure. That's. Then I wonder why, if that's the case, he's like scared. I think that's better. Let's see. Like, why wouldn't you use GCP if you have it, or if you have such a stable infrastructure for Google? Why is it not like GCP not up to the same standards? It's okay. I guess I share his concern.
Spanner on GCP is an entirely different product that apparently shouldn't even use the same name because they are so different from each other, and Google would never use the Spanner that they sell. That's just the way Google does things, though. They don't dog food most of the stuff they shell out and give us as slop. God, don't get me started on Flutter. Anyways, they then say a lot of people rely on KV, and the cascading impact caused a ton of issues and significantly broadened the blast radius. They went as far as screenshotting and sharing actual charts from their software, which is really cool. The fact that they have the willingness to
it's like, looks like Grafana or something, right?
Share the straight up absurdly high error rates here is super cool. This feels like a similar vibe to when I covered the T3 chat outage in more ways than one, but I do love the transparency here. I wish they would have said the.
Yep, that's really good. Transparency. Usually it's not like this. Usually it's like there was an outage, we blame them, and it's fixed.
Name Google somewhere because like no one knew they were built on top of Google, myself included. I went and asked all the different AIs if Cloudflare used Google, and all of them said no because nobody thought this was the case. Bleeping Computers article quoted a Cloudflare representative saying that it was a Google Cloud outage. They didn't say who it was, but it was a Cloudflare spokesperson. TechCrunch gave them a name, thankfully. Devin Smiley was the one who said it was related to the Google outage, as well as Ripley Park. So now there is finally public confirmation from Cloudflare employees that Workers KV is relying on Google Cloud for its cold storage. Getting that source was way more annoying than it should have been, but I am thankful we were able to do it. So as we see here, error rates for requests on KV were insane. For access, success getting through was horrible. They said that since the Cloudflare access uses Worker KV so directly, it serves as a good proxy to measure Worker KV availability. So the fact that it was at nearly 0% for 2.5 hours effectively means that Workers KV was down for 2.5 hours. They dropped the whole timeline, which is really fun to see how quickly they pick up.
Oh yeah, the timelines during outage incident report.
Fun stuff. It was 17:52 UTC, around 11:50 a.m. my time Pacific, where this started, and Cloudflare Warp started.
So it would be deep in the night for me. That's why I didn't. Okay, makes sense.
To see issues with new devices not being able to be spun up. Then at 18:05, which was 13 minutes later, Cloudflare Access team received an alert due to rapid increase in error rates. This is when things started to get bad. 1 minute later, multi-server specific incidents are combined into a single incident, and we identify a shared cause, which is Worker KV incident upgraded to P1. So root cause and service that has that root cause.
So P1, P0, whatever, usually is the P0 is the highest incident priority. You can give highest priority you can give an incident. The lower it is, the more important. And P0 is the most important.
Was identified within 16 minutes of this starting. Not even 14 minutes. That's pretty solid timing for a company of this size. Then not.
It's like 13 minutes. Cloud work team begins to see registration. Okay. Better access. Give the knowledge. Wait, let's go back to the graphs. So it was a few minutes, right? Like they probably, well, I don't know their alerting system, but I would imagine a jump this big should have cost an alert. If it holds for like a minute or two.
Started, and Cloudflare Warp started to see issues started to get bad. 1 minute later, multi-server specific incidents are combined into a single incident, and we identify a shared cause, which is worker KV incident upgraded to P1. So root cause and service that has that root cause identified within 16 minutes of this starting. Not even 14 minutes. That's pretty solid timing.
Yeah, it's not bad, but to be honest, for this sort of critical service, it's reshaped down a bit, but it's still solid, I think.
For a company of this,
the one weird thing is that they had to increase the severity of the impact from 15, like half an hour into it, while on the graphs you can see. So they already had like more than 80%, like 90% requests failing for 30 minutes. Nobody knew the inner workings of the system. Instantly 0.
they bump it to a P0, which is the highest severity that an incident can be. So that's like all hands on deck. Everyone who could possibly have anything they can do to help this, like drop what you're doing this now. 243, Cloudflare Access begins exploring options to remove worker KV dependency by migrating to a different backing store with the worker KV engineering team. This was proactive in the event the storage infrastructure continued to be down. Okay, this is actually pretty cool. They've talked before about how in a previous Cloudflare outage, things were down a lot longer than they should be, because since they build so heavily on themselves, they couldn't get into their own dashboards to unscrew things because their own dashboards were down.
Coming back to zero thing, it's basically you are waking up people who are the best usually at handling those situations and trying to get them to fix them. That's how important P0s are. That's an FYI.
Recognize the issue there now to the point where while this type of thing is occurring and they're still investigating, they'll in parallel work on a way to move off of the failing dependency of theirs just in case they don't find a happy path. That's really cool that they were looking into finding a way to unscrew access, which I'm assuming they use a lot internally for accessing all of these things. They were planning in parallel, how do we make it so we can access shit if we can't get this fixed in time? That's cool. And the fact they even call that out on the timeline is a level of transparency I would not expect from a company like this. But also, like, read this.
Yeah, the fact that they provided the timeline for the incident, like the usually this is internal. This is the incident timeline. It usually is not external, at least not to this extent. Like the timeline usually is very bare bones, if at all shared by the company.
Knowing that their goal here is to be as perceived as super transparent and owning as much here as possible, because a lot of us just got the crushing news that we are actually shipping something on Google Cloud. I thought I was Google Cloud free minus Gemini, and learning today that I wasn't hurt. But this mitigates it beyond how much it hurts, by quite a bit even. Okay, so I said 2 earlier, I meant 12. We are now at 109 my time.
Yeah, this sort of transparency builds the trust with the users. I think this is a very good move, but usually companies don't see it this way. They're like guarding the inner workings of the company for goddamn reason.
Time, which is 1909 UTC. Zero Trust Gateway begins working to remove worker KV as well by gracefully degrading the rules that referenced the identity and device posture states. So this is, again, them trying to find a way to get around worker KV on the services that are depending on it in case they can't get it back up in time. They then temporarily drop the things on those services that hit workers KV in order to reduce load on the worker KV so that the third party has a better chance of recovering. I can relate to this with T3 chat. I made a bunch of changes to reduce load to try and get it back up and left many of them in for far too long. We're still cleaning up some of the stuff I left around in order to do those workarounds. Cloudflare team continues to work on a path deploying worker KV release against an alternative backing data store and having critical services write configuration data to that store. This is, again, how do we mitigate internally? They were trying to spin up their own worker KV instance that would have enough data to unblock their own services that they could point everything to in the interim if they couldn't get standard worker KV back up quickly enough. The way they ran all these efforts in parallel in order to recover themselves in this incident is actually really cool. I love the transparency on it. Services begin to recover as storage infrastructure begins to recover. This is the third party, Google, recovering. Suddenly everything's coming back to life. They still see an error rate that is high enough that they care, so they keep looking through to find things. 2 minutes later, things are starting to be meaningfully improved as service is restored. And then another 3 minutes pass, everything's good. It is cool when you build with the right serverless mindset, how incident recovery is usually just the IO layer recovering. T3 chat, I didn't have to go reboot anything or worry about services crashing or whatnot. Everything's in a Lambda. So when it came back to life, it just worked again. And it's nice that I know for a fact Cloudflare builds with that mindset very deeply. So they probably didn't have to do anything in this time. This is just some monitoring, trying to make sure everything was good. But once your storage is back, everything comes back to life upon the next request. Enough of the timeline. Let's talk about what they're doing going forward to prevent this. You can probably get
remediation, so the people not worry, and shareholders can
guess what, but I like the way they put it. They're taking immediate steps to improve the resiliency of services that depend on workers' KV and their own storage infrastructure. Whose existing planned work that we are accelerating as a result of this incident. It seems to mostly be existing planned work, but yeah. This encompasses several work streams, including effort to avoid singular depths on storage infrastructure that they don't own. This will improve their ability for them to recover critical services like access gateway and warp. Critical not just for their users, but for them because they use this stuff a lot internally. I do like
it's good, coming back to the fact that Google doesn't use GCP. It's very reassuring. Company uses its product. It's very, very reassuring.
Like that they specify this is a singular dep on storage infra they don't own. I would imagine most of us did not know that using Cloudflare required the dependency in Nebraska. The difference being that this guy in Nebraska probably likes the thing that he does. And I don't know how much Google likes their infrastructure, especially GCP side of it. Yeah, so the big things that they have in flight are bringing forward the work to improve the redundancy on worker KV storage infra, remove the dep on the single provider. Apparently during the incident, they started to backfill stuff for their own infra to their own infra so that they don't have to worry about it causing them to have an outage again, at the very least for their internal stuff. Because imagine firefighting something like this when half your dashboard is broken. It sucks. Short-term blast radius remediations for individual products that were impacted by the incident so that each product becomes resilient to any loss of service caused by any single point of failure. So make it so worker KV doesn't kill everything. Implement tools that allow them to progressively re-enable namespaces during storage infrastructure incidents. So namespace in this case is the bucket that a bunch of KVs are going into. So my data and your data doesn't have to overlap too tightly. It seems like right now it's kind of on or off for all of them. It seems like they want to be able to turn everything off and then manually re-enable certain namespaces, probably their own internal ones, as things start to improve. That'll be a huge win for them. Having that knob during an outage in an incident is surprising they don't, but at the same time, it's cool they never needed it. They even call out why, which is they want to be able to pull up the right services without accidentally DDoSing themselves as things are being repopulated. Because if the whole cache layer dies and now everything has to hit cold storage, the reads from that are going to be brutal. It's one of the things people often forget about caches is, does it reduce load a ton and make things?
Yeah, cache. Forget about cache, then it fails, and then you are reminiscing of how good cache is, but you never appreciate it while it works.
Faster? Absolutely. But it also changes the performance characteristics of your service. So if the cache ever dies or gets purged, you're doing sometimes thousands upon thousands text more reads on your own service than you were before. And if you didn't build it to handle that because you've relied on the cache, you might not have even known you were relying on the cache. all of a sudden you're DDoSing yourself. And it seems like they probably did that too during all of this. This is a serious outage, and we understand that organizations and institutions that are large and small depend on us to protect and or run your websites, apps, zero trust, and network infrastructure. We are deeply sorry for the impact, and we are working diligently to improve our service resiliency. This is a genuinely really cool, unique coverage of an incident like this.
Yeah, I was thinking it's one of the better like outage report, public outage.
Especially when you consider how recently this happened. It was earlier today. This article came out within 4 hours of the outage being mitigated, and hopefully we'll have this video out soon too. The turnaround is nuts. The ownership is nuts. The fact that they resisted the urge to blame Google in this is really cool. I know many others did not do that. I've seen a lot of companies blaming GCP for their outage today. We even kind of fell for this where we didn't take our fault too seriously here because Cloudflare was down. But at the same time, that level of ownership is important. I did my best when we had the previous outage with Convex, but that was our outage. This one didn't feel that way due to the nature of how many people were affected, but that's no excuse. You need to own your services, own the thing you sell, and when the thing doesn't work for your users, you gotta acknowledge that that's your problem. And I'm proud of Cloudflare for doing such a good job with that, and also showing us what it's like to mitigate something like this when you build on top of your own things. A lot of lessons to learn from this. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Let me know what you think, and until next time, hopefully the internet doesn't die again.
That's pretty good. I came for kind of the security part of it, thought maybe, or not even security part of it, security as well, as just the internet went down, and I wanted to see the reason, but I stayed for all the dev insights that Theo gave, so thanks Theo for that. And yeah, the final words are actually pretty amazing, not even with like applications, just in life, right? You own your shit, own your mistakes, and if you depend on something and that fails, that's on you still. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one. Bye.